So the process of considering ethical leadership and the components, the reflection, considering the experiences and perspectives of others, philosophers, teachers, just professionals in various fields throughout the last really 3 or 4 modules in our course has been interesting. It's interesting how they've all build upon each other as we arrive at module 8. And so when it came to creating the moral compass, or the pictorial visualization of representation of I was a bit challenged by that. I wasn't sure exactly. I think I was a little too literal initially, like what's north and what's south. And so rather than creating something and really getting mired down with how I didn't want to behave, decisions I don't want to make, I tried to keep it simple. And that was the bulk of my reflection, and just really as I considered the 4 or 5 the videos and the articles for the specific module 8, that was the challenge, but also it was the really interesting, rewarding part of this module. And so I hope that you all had a similar experience in as you explored these topics. So yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect. It was interesting. I did find that each author or presenter in the videos, they really did add to the conversation. And if not presenting something I hadn't considered before, perhaps they presented it in not even necessarily a new light, but brought it back to my awareness that, yeah, actually, I do think that way, or I do behave that way, or I do, that does align with how my decision-making process, or ethical, or integrity behavior. And so I found echoes of biblical truths, or others might phrase them as truisms, or whatever truths. The quote-unquote golden rule about treating others as you would have them to treat you, or let your yes be yes, your no be no, as Lee said, be honest, or thou shalt not lie. And that includes lying to yourself as well to others, and being consistent and honest with yourself, perhaps primarily or initially, as much as you have to be honest with others. But all of these things, for me, are within the context of a higher external standard. So while I might wrestle with the internal process of daily minute by minute decision making and ethical decision making, I really for myself, I really consider it something that internal, like the analogy of, I think it's called a universal clock. It's set to an external, like, satellite, that it's a consistent time set according to an external standard that we can all align our ethical, behavioral decisions according to. So anyway, so as I wrote here, they may define it as an internal process, and there's an aspect of obviously, that is internal, but I'm convinced that we must make decisions from an external standard, or else we're going to point to a different quote-unquote north each time we're challenged to make a decision. And I don't want my north to be inconsistent, and I don't want my standard to be changing according to what's convenient for that time. It's complex, so I don't mean to oversimplify or put it in terms of black and white, but at the end of the day, there are a few simple, consistent standards and self-checks, questions, a system of checks and balances that I kind of illustrate in my visual compass that I want to be consistent against throughout my life. So I find that this is a constant process. It's often unconscious unless we're challenged, as we have been in these modules, to consider our decisions and our ethical, and moral reasoning. And so just that constant battle of what we want to do versus what we should do, according to that standard. So for me, I find it helpful to ask, should I or should not do something? Or is this the right course of action? I can put it against the standard, the external standard that gives me a pretty clear answer on the answers to these questions. Is it compassionate? Does it add value? Does it contribute something to the world? Does it make the world around me better? Does it seek to understand others' perspectives, experiences? Is it in others' best interest? Or am I being selfish here? Is it consistent with the foundational vision and mission that we all are shooting for? That could be interpreted different ways, or applied, I should say, different ways. Does it respect others' dignity? Is it honest? Is it fair? Is it just? So that's how I chose to visualize and my moral compass. I moved away from the literal north-south compass rose, and really just want to live in the center of, being able to answer those questions according to the external standard of others, treating others as I would have to be treated, and seeking others' welfare. So that's how I represented that. And I used Draw.io or diagrams.net. Here, I used that to create that compass. And when it comes to aligning with the correlation of the 2.3, and regardless of my role, I want to make consistent ethical decisions that benefit others and my own quality of life. Or as some of our speakers said specifically, our integrity is undermined or compromised. And and relevancy, I feel like they each articulated different aspects of ethical decision making and behavior. I did disagree with Mintz the way he phrased it, at least. He seemed to qualify his statement of we should treat others as our equals. He qualified that statement. The second part of that sentence, as he wrote it, was as long as they seek to do the right thing as we know it. But whether we like it or not, I believe we're to treat others as we would be treated regardless of their actions or intentions. So I disagreed, at least with the way he phrased that. But other than that, lots of good stuff there. And as I reflected and as I referenced previous modules, went back and looked at all of those, what we'd learned and explored through there, and created my visualization. It challenged me to examine my own rationale or foundations of ethical decision making, but also, as I illustrated in my compass, the essential questions that I answer for myself against that external unchanging standard when faced with ethical or moral choices. And it's whether or not anyone else even notices whether or not I made the right choice. I will know, because at the end of the day, I do want to go to sleep knowing that I held myself to a higher standard. I want to live a life without regrets, even if it's not easy or popular.